Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be with you today. And I want to talk about compassion versus empathy. I want to talk about why we need compassionate leadership right now and why we need to focus on compassion over empathy at the time that we are in. So let's talk about it. Compassion versus empathy. Many people think that these are the same thing, but they actually are not. You will notice, maybe you've been through this training yourself, lots of companies do training on empathy, but really they should be doing training on compassion. And I want to talk about why, to be a great leader, especially during this time, we need to focus on compassion. We need to focus on being compassionate leaders. So let's take a step back. When I first learned about compassion versus empathy and the difference, it was at an event here in Madison, and I went and saw Matthieu Ricard speak. And so he is a French-born Buddhist monk, and he's known as the happiest man in the world. He's a fantastic speaker and author and just an incredible human. And he was talking about that. He was the subject of a study in which it was a scientific study. And so he was connected, to all the wires and everything. And they were studying his brain and what happens when he meditates. And so they gave him a scenario because they wanted to see him meditate on empathy. So they gave him a scenario and they saw which parts of the brain lit up, and they were like, whoa, 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 what are you meditating on right now? Because the parts of your brain that are lighting up are totally different than what we've seen in other scientific studies we've done. And so he said, well, I'm focusing on compassion. And they're like, oh, we wanted you to meditate on empathy. And he said, well, those are two completely different things. So then they had him meditate on empathy, and a totally other part of the brain lit up. And so they realized through the study that compassion and empathy are two completely different things. And so they learned that when you focus on compassion, when you're practicing compassion, the parts of your brains that light up are the parts that show positive emotions and emotions of affiliation and maternal love. And empathy shows more of the parts of the brain that light up. Can you tell I'm not a scientist? It shows more of the parts of the brain that light up when there's negative emotions or distress. So what I learned from his talk, and also in the study, and also other research I've done and other articles that I've read, is that too much empathy can actually be super debilitating. It can lead to emotional exhaustion, distress, and fatigue. Having too much empathy for people and situations can lead to burnout. And empathetic burnout is most notable in professions where people are confronted daily with others' sufferings. So for example, healthcare workers, social workers, they have and practice a ton of empathy every day, and it is debilitating. They're completely exhausted from it. And what I realized is the state of the world right now, and with our companies and our teams, we are all in this state. We are all in a position where we are confronted daily with other people's sufferings. So what we need to do is practice compassion. Here's how I like to think of the difference between empathy versus compassion. Empathy is you take on the other's pain. So you see they're going through pain, you feel it yourself, you've taken it on, now you are in that pain. You are feeling the pain of them. Whereas compassion is you understand the other's pain. You feel for them, but you don't feel with them. So here's a nice visual example. This is empathy. Somebody is hurt. You notice they're hurt. You go over, you feel the hurt. You take on the hurt and you run away because you are debilitated. You are in the pain with them and you can't do anything to now help them or the situation. Compassion, however, is different. Compassion is, I see somebody hurting. I understand their pain. I see what's going on. I'm moved to action to help them alleviate their suffering. So that's the difference. Empathy, nobody's being helped here. Compassion, people are being helped here. So for me personally, ever since I learned this and I've become more aware of when I'm feeling more empathy or compassion, I've noticed that oftentimes empathy for me overwhelms me and it leaves me feeling stuck and helpless. I take on the other person's pain so much that I don't know what to do. I just feel terrible. Whereas compassion, when I feel compassion, it's like a powerful surge that goes through me. I understand that they're in pain. I understand that something's going on, and I move to take action to help them. And most people agree we need a combo of both empathy and compassion to be the most helpful to people. But I've just noticed in situations where I feel stuck and like I can't move forward, I'm like, oof, I'm taking on too much. I have too much empathy right now, and I try to shift it into compassion. Also, there's this awesome article I read on the 4 components of compassion that I thought would be really helpful to share. The first is cognitive. So in compassion, it's the first step is bringing attention or awareness to recognize that there is suffering. Then affective, feeling emotionally moved by that suffering. Then intentional, wishing there to be relief from that suffering. And motivational, a readiness to take action to relieve that suffering. So this readiness to take action is totally unique to being compassionate. However, I want to touch on that real quick. A readiness to take action to relieve that suffering. Action to relieve does not mean fix. So in our little visual example, yes, the little blob was able to bandage up the other little blob's foot and was able to fix the problem. But we can't in our daily lives, I'm sure you've been seeing with your own teams, you can't fix all of their suffering. You can't fix all their problems. So action to relieve does not mean fix. Action to relieve could mean giving your undivided attention and listening to the person. It could mean encouraging them to take a break. It could mean saying, I understand what you're going through. I'm worried about the same thing. So when we talk about compassion and we practice compassion, we are ready to take action to relieve the pain, but that does not mean we're going to fix all their problems for them. So we need to focus on being compassionate leaders right now. Being compassionate over being empathetic is better for our own well-being and the well-being of those who need us. Going back to our visual example, in the first example, when you're just having empathy, you're taking on so much of the emotion, so much of the pain that you can't help at all. You run away because you're equally as in pain. Being compassionate is better for our well-being and for those who need us. Our teams, our families, our communities, they need us to be as strong and as present as possible, and we need to show up. If we are debilitated, if we are burnt out, we can't show up for those who need us. It is really tricky right now. We're in a very tricky situation because we're all experiencing our own forms of pain. And if we have too much empathy and take on everyone else's pain, we will burn out. So we need to experience our own pain. We can't shove it to the side. That's not good for anyone. We need to experience our own pain and be compassionate so we can understand others' pain, help them, but not take it home with us. That's the big piece here. We need to understand their pain. We need to help them, but we cannot take it home with us. We will completely burn out. We will be completely debilitated, and then we can't show up the next day to help anyone. So I want you to go through these reflection questions. First, I want you to just sit with empathy versus compassion. Sit with it. Maybe you've never heard that these are two different things before. I want you to sit with it. What comes up for you? I want you to ask yourself, when have I been too empathetic? And what can I do differently to not bring it home with me? What do I do to show compassion with my team? You all show tons of compassion. I know it through our conversations. You are all extremely compassionate leaders. Think about, what do you do to show compassion with your team? What's the one thing you want to keep doing to show compassion? And what's one thing that you want to start doing to show compassion? Remember, this is an unprecedented time we're going through, and we're in the middle of. You are doing a really great job. You are all amazing. I'm so excited to talk tomorrow at the round table. You compassionate leaders, you. All right. Have a good night and see you tomorrow.